Hey everybody, it's Brock and we got a brand new episode of All About. Doing something a little different today. We're talking about the 10 biggest mistakes I've seen over the years in the saltwater hobby. I plan on doing a few of these because I easily thought of more than 10. I worked at my local fish store for many years, and with that you get to take care of hundreds of tanks, which gives you a ton of scenarios to run into that you might not when just having one tank at your home. I hope you'll learn a lot from today's video. You can add some tips and tricks to your toolkit from my experience. Let's dive in. Alright, number 1, saltwater top off, freshwater top off. When setting up your saltwater tank, you'll notice the water is going to evaporate and you need to top it off. Big mistake I see, especially with beginners, is they top off their tank with more salt water. Because it's saltwater, right? What could go wrong? A lot. Whenever water evaporates in a saltwater tank, only the pure water evaporates. The salt and minerals stay. So, say your tank is full of water and the salinity tests out at 1.023 using a hydrometer or refractometer. Over the month, that water will evaporate naturally. If you were to test it after a month, technically the salinity should now be higher because you have less water volume. You pour fresh water back in, more water volume, salinity goes back down to 1.023. So think about it. You started at 1.023, water evaporates over the month, now you test at 1.025. If you were to then add salt water by mistake, it would jump that salinity to a dangerous level at that point. Testing the salinity is also how you can get better at raising and lowering it because you know what kind of water to put back in. Say you're at 1.023, but you'd like to bring it up to 2.4, 2.5 for a reef tank. As the water evaporates, you'd slowly top it off with salt water, testing it out each time until you hit your desired salinity. Keep a hydrometer on hand. That saves tanks all the time. A little bonus story to this mistake is knowing what water you're about to pour into the tank after a water change. When doing services at the fish store, we always had specific buckets for specific types of water. Blue lids had salt water, clear containers were fresh. One of the days we were on service, they had gotten mixed up, and I did a 15-gallon water change at someone's house and proceeded to fill up the tank with 15 gallons of fresh water instead of salt. After a couple hours, owner called saying their fish were breathing rapidly, the inverts were perishing. We immediately realized that the buckets had been mistakenly filled. We quickly did another water change, putting salt back in, of course, and we're able to keep the fish alive, but the inverts were toast. So before you do your water change, make sure you know which is salt water and which is not. Number 2, copper with inverts. Copper is a great medicine for the tank, but boy can it cause some issues if not treated correctly. At our local fish store, you can imagine tanks stacked in 3 that go across the wall, and then behind that wall, we had tanks plumbed in a way that every 3 tanks fed into one sump. So each being 30 gallons, you end up with over 90 gallons of water circulating. Now we like to keep our fish only tanks dosed with copper. We got fish orders bi-weekly, so we wanted those fish coming into a tank that could kill off any bad bacteria or pests off them. And it worked very well until someone mistakenly put copper in the wrong tank. So it technically was a tank that only had fish in it, but the sump connected 2 other tanks that we had inverts and corals in. The day it was dosed, we didn't see any issues, but the next morning we came into the shop and it smelled horrible. The tank that had been mistakenly dosed with copper had our shipment of turbo snails in there. Turbos are big, so you can imagine 25 large snails dead in a tank. The smell is horrible. Now we didn't know this tank was dosed with copper, we just knew something was wrong. The water levels were tested and of course ammonia, nitrates, phosphates were through the roof. But it didn't help us much because obviously that many snails perishing in a tank is going to cause a spike. So we pulled out some polyfilter, put it in the sump. This is some cool stuff because the pad itself is going to change colors depending on what's wrong with the tank. Brown for organic waste, yellow for ammonia, blue for copper, and more. And I'm not kidding you, after about 6 hours of it being in the sump, that filter pad was sky blue. And that let us know what happened. To fix it, we did a large water change. Polyfilter helps, but also adding carbon will take it out very fast. On the flip side, if you are dosing copper, make sure to take your carbon out. So, as a reminder, do not dose copper in a tank with inverts and corals. They are gonna perish. Number 3, Lysol, Febreze in the air. I don't know if y'all experienced this, but we saw it all the time at people's houses. People would come in and have us test their water, and the ammonia would be sky high. We'd ask how they're feeding, are they doing their water changes, and over time, with enough investigation, we realized that they were spraying Lysol, and in some cases Febreze, all over their house, especially over the top of the tank. Doing this puts so many different chemicals into the tank, and it will throw off lots of your parameters in the tank. In most cases, it would not spike a tank quickly and cause the fish and inverts to perish, but if you aren't paying attention, it slowly but surely rose those levels up to a point that it did cause damage. Having a glass lid on top of your tank is obviously a good precaution, but I'd go to the extent of just not spraying those in the room that the tank is in, or at least not nearby. And you got to think about other cleaners too. Spraying the counters near the tank, that can also hurt your parameters if it gets inside. Number 4, lotion in the tank. This is definitely a niche, but maybe something you could be doing by mistake and you haven't ever ruled it out yet. So we had someone that we serviced their tank, but they were also very involved with their tank. Nice reef tank, fragged their corals, even cleaned it themselves at times. Just a great caretaker of their tank. What we started noticing is their levels kept rising and the corals were not doing well at all. And what we realized is they would wash their hands before getting into the tank, which is great, but it was this lotion-like soap that they were going into the tank with instead of just a basic antibacterial soap. So the only conclusion we could come up with is the lotion coming in contact with the water, as well as handling the corals, were causing stress and elevated water levels, even with us doing the water changes. Now, of course, it was a guess at first, right? So we had them stop washing their hands with that, and over the next couple of months, everything was back to normal. A good point to make with this mistake is make sure you're washing your hands before and after messing with your tank. There are many corals that will secrete mucus onto you when handled, and if that gets near your eyes, nose, or mouth, it can really hurt you. And on the flip side, you don't want to go into your tank with dirty hands or some solution on your hands that could hurt your levels and your tank mates. Number 5, over 50% water changes. With any fish tank, your levels are going to rise and fall naturally. It's what it's supposed to do. Keep up with it well, and they usually stay level or only increase enough to do your water changes and bring them down each month. Spikes are going to happen though, usually from mistakes you make. The heater got too hot and KO'd the tank. You overfed your fish and nitrates skyrocket. Coral food, if not dosed correctly, can definitely increase those levels fast. What I see a lot is people have a spike and want to go and drain their tank of water and pour new in, hoping that it makes things better. In my opinion, you should never take out more than 50% of the water in one water change. You're risking a recycle if you take out too much of your existing water and replace it with brand new. And then you're really in a bind. Think about the water testing parameters. You test your nitrates and they come out to 40 ppm, which stands for parts per million. Dangerous levels. Keep math in mind though. If you drained 50% of your tank, it would drop those nitrates to 20 parts per million because the test is the total in your water volume. So you cannot make it just go away with one water change. It's much better practice to break it out. And I'll give you an example. If you've been watching my videos, you know I KO'd my tank with a heater a couple years ago. It was a 75-gallon tank, and the first water change I did was 25 gallons. Math comes out to 33%. That's a lot. And it's probably even more because the rock is going to displace the water. They don't truly have 75 gallons of water in there. Nitrates went from 40 down to 20. I waited 4 to 5 days for the new water to settle in, and then I did another water change, only taking out 15 gallons this time, 20%. 4 or 5 days later, nitrates were down to 5. Because remember, putting new water in helps, and your new filter media is also putting in the work to get those levels straightened out. Make sure you put new media in if you are going through a spike. To sum it up, don't recycle your tank by taking too much water out. Be patient with it. Spread out your water changes and get new filter media in there. Number 6, washing out dry sand versus live sand. We actually just talked about this in my new reef tank build. When buying sand for your new tank, you're going to have many choices. There's usually 2 types, live sand or dry sand. The difference is simple. Live sand just means that you get some good bacteria mixed into the sand bag as a liquid, and it's very beneficial for new tanks getting started or even seasoned tanks that are being moved or replacing a sand bed. With live sand, you want to cut open the bag and pour everything into the tank, sand and that watery solution mixed in it. If you drain that out, you're wasting the extra money you spent on to have that in your tank. With dry sand, you most definitely want to drain this out with a water hose. We usually poke a number of tiny holes into the bottom of the sand bag, shove a water hose in the bag, and let water hose run for 15 to 30 minutes. And you will see a ton of dust and cloudiness run out of that bag that you really do not want in your tank, because it will take a ton of siphoning that sand after the fact, and it can really cloud up your water if it gets stirred up in the process. So that's one pretty straightforward. Wash out your dry sand, pour everything in if you're using live sand. Number 7, not cycling your tank. This is a big one, surprisingly controversial too. I'll give you my take. A new tank has to go through what we call the nitrogen cycle. To get the cycle started, we need to seed it. This can be as simple as adding live sand or live rock into the new tank with your dry rock, or bacteria sold in a bottle, which has become more and more popular over the years. The cycle is simply the ammonia turning into nitrite and then into nitrate. So those levels will spike individually, eventually leveling out. If you tested your water during the cycle, you could watch the ammonia go up and then come back down. Nitrite would follow suit, as well as the nitrate. So with bacteria, you need ammonia. This can be done by adding a damselfish, which is an extremely hardy fish that can usually survive the cycle. You can also do a fishless cycle by simply dropping some food into the tank or a piece of shrimp to give that bacteria something to feed on. You do this all in one day, and then you wait. If I had to give you one keyword for the saltwater hobby, it's patience. You're literally building an ocean environment in your living room. Why rush it? This cycle usually takes 4 to 8 weeks to complete. Know it's done. Test those water levels to make sure the ammonia, nitrate leveled out. Now, if you're using some of these new bacterias in a bottle, apparently they can cycle a tank within 10 days. Very cool, but at the same time, I'd still wait it out before you spend money on fish and corals and they end up perishing. That seemed more of a guide than a mistake, but the mistake is people purchasing everything they needed in the tank, as well as getting fish that are not day one fish and putting it all together in one day just for the fish to not make it. Be patient and cycle that tank. Be very aware of people that post videos that say something along the lines of, I added corals and fish on day one of setting up my fish tank. I literally saw someone on Instagram preaching that in their video, and then I started skimming through the comments. The truth was that he used all of his cycled water from another tank into the new one. So of course, you could have fish and corals on day one, you're using established water. Be on the lookout for stuff like that. Don't get tricked, especially as a beginner. Number 8, not acclimating your fish. Oof, this is a good one. And mistakes I see many people make. So whenever you get a new fish, coral, or invert, they are in water that is its own temperature and has its own parameter levels. You cannot just open the bag and dump them into the new tank, especially inverts. They are very sensitive to salinity changes. Acclimating is very easy. I usually will drop the bag into the tank, open it up and fold it over itself so that it can float around, and this gets the temperature the same after about 15 minutes. Then I'll pour them into a bowl and slowly add water from my tank into their existing water over the course of an hour. If it's a more fragile creature like an invert, I'll usually double that, and if it's a starfish, I'll triple it, just as they are so fragile to change. Drip tubes are also super convenient. You can control how fast or slow you drip the water into there. Once you have doubled the amount of water they came in, you'll know they are now as level to your tank as you can get. Number 9, overfeeding. Feeding your fish, feeding your inverts, feeding your corals. They love it. Sometimes it can be too much. The rule I always went by was the fish's stomach is only as big as their eye. 100% true? I don't know, but it's a good reference to go by. They don't need as much food as you think. And also, it can be better practice to feed smaller portions multiple times a day rather than just one large portion in the afternoon. Think about it. A fish is swimming all day long, so they are digesting anything they are eating very quickly. There's a number of foods you can feed your fish: pellets, flakes, frozen food. Frozen food is obviously the closest that they eat in the wild, and they come in these convenient cubes. But the mistake I see all the time is people will drop that entire cube into the tank. Unless y'all have 30 fish in the tank, you do not need to drop an entire cube of frozen food into the tank, even if it looks cool in a video. They can't eat all of that, it stops up your filters, and your levels will increase if you do it enough times. Best practice that I like to do is thaw a couple cubes, different kinds usually, into some Tupperware, and you feed that to your fish over the next few days. Keep it in the fridge, of course, after feeding them. Feeding corals can make a mess too. I always saw people make mistakes with reef roids. Great coral food that comes in a powder that you mix in some water and pour into the tank. I always saw people not reading the directions, pouring too much into the tank, and a spike occurred. Corals are almost the same as feeding fish. Smaller portions more times, rather than one big feeding, can actually be more beneficial. And number 10, do your water changes. And I'll say it again, do your water changes. 20% a month or 10% bi-weekly is the usual rule. Feeding your fish means they're gonna poop, which detritus is gonna raise those levels up. Doing a water change cleans that out and keeps it level. I've had so many people come to the shop saying they hadn't done water changes in months, everything's doing great, and then the next month, their tank crashes. And it's really simple. You can take perfect care of the tank, but those levels are still gonna slowly rise over time. So your fish will get used to it and can become hardier until it hits that tipping point and they just cannot handle the level that your water parameters got to. I've personally gone 3 to 4 months without doing a water change before, but it was also in a reef tank that I had up for more than 5 years, very coral rich tank, but still I needed to do a water change eventually. I feel like it's just basic practice with aquarium care. And I know you can still find videos nowadays of people saying they've never done a water change. That's awesome, but if you're a beginner, get that practice in, or if you don't want a chance to spike, let's do those water changes. And there you have it, 10 biggest mistakes I've seen in the saltwater hobby, from topping off with salt water instead of fresh, skipping water changes. These are all real scenarios I've witnessed that can make or break your tank. Good news, every single one of these mistakes is avoidable with a little knowledge and patience. Remember, this hobby is all about the keyword I mentioned earlier, patience. Whether you're cycling a new tank, acclimating new livestock, or dealing with a parameter spike, rushing things is usually what gets people in trouble. Take your time, test your water regularly. When something seems off, investigate before making drastic changes. Like I said at the beginning, we've got plenty more mistakes to share, so keep an eye out for part 2 of this series. In the meantime, if you've made any of these mistakes yourself, don't feel bad. We've all been there. Important thing is learning from them and becoming a better aquarist because of it. If you found this helpful, drop a comment below and let me know which mistake surprised you the most, or share one of your own. The more we learn from each other, the better off we'll be in this hobby. And as always, if you have any questions about your tank, don't hesitate to reach out on here or social media. Happy holidays, stay safe, be kind, and I'll see y'all later.